There's a moment when silence becomes louder than any song ever sung, and for Guy Penrod's millions of devoted fans around the world, that silence arrived like an unexpected storm on an otherwise peaceful day. Just 1 minute ago, the truth finally emerged from behind closed doors, and what his family revealed has left the entire gospel music community in absolute shock. Now, before we dive into what was actually said and why it matters more than you might think, I need you to understand something crucial. This isn't just another celebrity story that'll fade away by tomorrow morning. This is about a man whose voice has literally carried people through their darkest valleys, whose hymns have echoed through hospital rooms and funeral services, whose music has been the soundtrack to countless moments of both celebration and grief. When rumors start swirling around someone like Guy Penrod, they don't just affect one family or one career. They ripple through an entire community of believers who've come to see him as more than just an entertainer. What his wife shared in her statement goes far deeper than simply denying false reports. And by the time you finish listening to this, you're going to understand exactly why this particular moment in gospel music history will be remembered for years to come. The truth she revealed wasn't what anyone expected, and the way she chose to address these rumors shows us something profound about faith, family, and the cost of living in the public eye. Let's talk about what actually happened here, because the story behind the story is where the real revelation lies. Over the past several weeks, social media platforms have been flooded with whispers, half-truths, and outright fabrications about Guy Penrod's health and family situation. These weren't just casual mentions or passing comments. We're talking about coordinated waves of speculation that seemed to gain momentum with each passing day. Fan forums that usually celebrate his legacy suddenly became hotbeds of concern and confusion. People who had never met Guy personally were sharing detailed accounts of supposed tragedies, alleged health crises, and family emergencies that had absolutely no basis in reality. The interesting thing about modern rumor mills is how they feed on themselves, creating this self-sustaining cycle where each retelling adds another layer of drama, another degree of urgency, another reason to believe that something catastrophic must be happening behind the scenes. What started as perhaps an innocent misunderstanding or a misinterpreted social media post quickly snowballed into something far more damaging and pervasive. Friends and family members found themselves fielding panicked phone calls from well-meaning supporters who genuinely believed that Guy was facing his final days. Church congregations were organizing prayer chains based on information that had been completely distorted as it passed from person to person across the digital landscape. Now here's where things get really interesting, and this is something you need to understand if you're going to grasp the full significance of what Guy Penrod's wife ultimately revealed. This pattern of rumor and speculation isn't actually new. It's been happening to public figures in the gospel music world for decades, but the internet has amplified it to unprecedented levels. Think about how information used to spread in the pre-digital age. Someone would hear something at church, maybe mention it to a few friends, and by the time the story made its way across town, it might be completely unrecognizable from the original truth. But that process took time, and somewhere along the chain, cooler heads usually prevailed and facts got checked. Today, a single tweet or Facebook post can reach millions of people in seconds, and once that information is out there, it takes on a life of its own. The psychology behind why people share these rumors is actually fascinating and reveals something important about human nature. When we hear that someone we admire might be suffering, there's an immediate impulse to share that information, partly out of genuine concern, and partly because being the bearer of significant news makes us feel important and connected to something bigger than ourselves. We're not necessarily malicious when we hit that share button. We genuinely believe we're helping to mobilize prayer support or raise awareness. But what we're actually doing is participating in a system that can cause real harm to real people who are trying to live authentic lives while also maintaining appropriate boundaries between their public ministry and private reality. When Guy Penrod's wife finally decided to break her silence and address the mounting speculation, She did so with a combination of grace and firmness that honestly deserves our closest attention. Her statement wasn't a defensive rant or an angry rebuttal. It was a carefully measured response from someone who has clearly spent considerable time thinking about how to balance transparency with privacy, how to honor the concern of genuine supporters, while also setting appropriate boundaries against intrusive speculation. She began by acknowledging the paradox that every public figure faces. The very people who make your career possible through their support and loyalty are sometimes the same people whose concern can become overwhelming and invasive. She expressed genuine gratitude for the prayers that have been lifted up on behalf of their family, recognizing that these prayers come from a place of authentic love and spiritual connection. But then she did something really important. She gently, but firmly drew a line between appropriate concern and harmful speculation. She pointed out that many of the rumors circulating online weren't just slightly exaggerated versions of truth. They were completely fabricated scenarios that bore no resemblance to their actual family situation. The challenge she faced in crafting this response was significant. How do you correct false information without inadvertently giving it more oxygen? How do you reassure concerned supporters without revealing more about your private life than you're comfortable sharing? How do you maintain the warmth and accessibility that have always characterized your relationship with fans, while also establishing that certain boundaries are non-negotiable? What makes her statement truly remarkable isn't just what she said about the specific rumors, it's the larger framework she provided for understanding how we should approach information about people's lives, especially when those people have dedicated themselves to ministry and public service. She talked about the importance of grounding ourselves in faith rather than fear, of choosing trust over suspicion, of extending the same grace to others that we hope to receive ourselves when we're misunderstood or misrepresented. This isn't just generic spiritual platitude dropping. This is hard-won wisdom from someone who has spent decades navigating the complexities of being married to a man whose voice is recognized by millions, but whose private struggles and triumphs belong to a much smaller circle. She made a point that really resonates when you think about it carefully. Our fascination with potential tragedy often overshadows our celebration of ongoing blessing. We're quicker to believe and share bad news than we are to amplify good news. And this tendency reveals something about the human condition that should make us pause and reflect. The attention given to these death rumors was massive and immediate. But how much attention do we give to the actual positive work that Guy and his family continue to do? How often do we share stories of lives changed by his music, of people brought to faith through his ministry, of the quiet, unglamorous faithfulness that characterizes their daily walk with God? Let's dig into something that doesn't get talked about nearly enough in discussions about gospel music personalities and ministry families: the actual cost of living a life that's simultaneously public and private, sacred and accessible. Guy Penrod didn't stumble into fame accidentally. He spent years honing his craft, performing in churches and small venues long before he became a household name in gospel music circles. His time with the Gaither vocal band brought him to prominence, but it also brought a level of scrutiny and expectation that most people simply cannot comprehend unless they've experienced it themselves. When you're singing about eternal truths, when your music is meant to point people towards something infinitely greater than yourself, the stakes feel different than they do for secular performers. You're not just an entertainer who can have an off night and move on to the next city. You're carrying the weight of being an example, a representative of faith itself. This creates a unique pressure that affects every aspect of family life. His wife's statement touched on this when she referenced the challenges that life inevitably brings, acknowledging that their family isn't immune to difficulty, but also making clear that these normal human struggles shouldn't be fodder for public consumption or speculation. Ministry families deal with the same financial pressures, health concerns, relationship dynamics, and personal doubts that every family faces, but they do so under a microscope that never stops examining and judging. There's a profound principle embedded in what she shared, and it goes straight to the heart of why words matter so much more than we typically acknowledge in our casual, scroll and share culture. Every rumor that gets repeated becomes more concrete in people's minds, even if it started as pure fiction. Psychologists call this the illusory truth effect, the tendency to believe information to be correct after repeated exposure. So when someone sees the same rumor about Guy Penrod's supposed health crisis posted by 3 different people over the course of a week, their brain starts to accept it as fact regardless of whether any credible source has verified it. This is why his wife's decision to speak out wasn't just about correcting one specific set of rumors. It was about interrupting a pattern that had the potential to solidify into accepted truth if left unchallenged. She understood that silence in the face of persistent falsehood can sometimes be interpreted as confirmation. So speaking up became necessary, even though it required vulnerability and exposure she might have preferred to avoid. The careful way she chose her words reveals someone who understands the delicate balance required when you're trying to correct misinformation without sounding defensive, when you're trying to set boundaries without seeming ungrateful for genuine support, when you're trying to maintain privacy without appearing secretive or evasive. Throughout her statement, Guy Penrod's wife kept circling back to a central theme that deserves our full attention. Their family remains anchored in faith, unity, and gratitude regardless of external circumstances or public perception. This wasn't just a throwaway line meant to sound spiritual, it was the foundation upon which her entire response was built. When she emphasized faith, she was pointing to a source of stability that exists independent of public opinion, social media trends, or the ebb and flow of career success. This kind of rootedness doesn't develop overnight. It's cultivated through years of choosing to trust God, even when circumstances don't make sense, even when prayers seem unanswered, even when the path forward is unclear. The unity she referenced speaks to the intentional work required to keep a family connected and strong when external pressures are constantly trying to pull members in different directions. Ministry families face unique challenges in this area because the demands of serving others can sometimes compete with the need to nurture private relationships and maintain healthy boundaries. The fact that she specifically highlighted gratitude tells us something important about their mindset and approach to life. Gratitude isn't the absence of difficulty. It's the choice to recognize and honor blessings even in the midst of challenges. It's easy to be grateful when everything is going perfectly, but the kind of gratitude she's describing is something deeper and more resilient. It's the kind that can coexist with struggle and uncertainty. Here's where we need to address something that became a focal point of the online speculation and that her statement directly confronted: the widespread assumption that there must be some hidden tragedy, some dramatic revelation waiting to be uncovered. This assumption reveals a lot about how we've been conditioned to consume information in the digital age. We've become accustomed to clickbait headlines that promise shocking revelations, to stories that take wild, dramatic turns, to narratives that feed our appetite for sensationalism. So when rumors start circulating about a beloved public figure, we almost expect there to be some terrible truth lurking beneath the surface. Guy Penrod's wife made it explicitly clear: there is no hidden tragedy. There is no dramatic revelation. There is no secret crisis being covered up or minimized. This straightforward denial is actually quite radical in a culture that's grown skeptical of simple truths. One of the most strategic and spiritually mature aspects of her statement was how she redirected attention away from speculation and toward substance. Instead of getting bogged down in point-by-point refutations of every false rumor, she invited supporters to focus on what actually matters: the positive impact of Guy's music, the strength of their family bonds, and the message of hope they continue to share with the world. Guy Penrod's music has been a source of comfort and inspiration to countless people over decades of ministry. His renditions of classic hymns have introduced timeless truths to new generations of believers. His voice has provided a soundtrack for worship services, funerals, celebrations, and quiet moments of personal devotion across the globe. These are the things that matter: These are the things that will outlast any temporary rumor cycle. When she referenced the message of hope they continue to share, she was tapping into something that goes to the very heart of Guy Penrod's entire ministry and career. Hope isn't just one theme among many in gospel music. It's the central message that makes everything else make sense. The hope that Guy and his family represent isn't the shallow optimism that pretends problems don't exist, or that everything will work out perfectly according to our preferences. It's the deep, anchored hope that says God is sovereign, that redemption is real, that our present sufferings are not the end of the story. This kind of hope can coexist with pain, disappointment, and uncertainty because it's rooted in something bigger than our immediate circumstances. The call to seek truth over speculation is perhaps the most practically applicable piece of wisdom embedded in her entire statement. And it's something every single person listening to this needs to take seriously. In an era where misinformation spreads faster than fact-checking can keep up, where algorithms reward engagement rather than accuracy, we have a responsibility to be more discerning about what we believe and what we share. Seeking truth requires effort. It means pausing before hitting the share button to ask whether we actually know something to be true or whether we're just passing along unverified claims. It means being willing to sit with uncertainty rather than jumping to conclusions that satisfy our curiosity but might not reflect reality. The final major theme in her statement was the encouragement to extend grace rather than give energy to unfounded rumors, and this might actually be the most challenging call to action for many people. Grace is costly. Grace requires us to assume the best about people even when we could justifiably assume the worst. Grace means choosing kindness when criticism would be easier. When she talked about extending grace, she was asking for something quite specific, that fans and supporters would choose to trust her words, that they would resist the temptation to dig deeper for some hidden truth that doesn't exist, that they would allow the family to maintain appropriate privacy while still feeling connected to their ministry. What happened with these rumors about Guy Penrod and his family isn't an isolated incident. It's part of a larger pattern that affects countless public figures, particularly those in ministry and faith-based entertainment. When we participate in rumor spreading, even with good intentions, we contribute to a culture that values sensation over substance, that prioritizes our curiosity over others' well-being. We also set up unrealistic expectations for public figures, expecting them to be simultaneously accessible and distant, transparent and private, human and somehow above human struggles. So where does this leave us as a community of supporters, as people who genuinely care about Guy Penrod and his family? Her statement provides a clear path forward, if we're willing to take it. First, we can choose to trust the words she's shared, rather than continuing to search for hidden meanings. Second, we can redirect our energy towards celebrating the ongoing ministry, supporting new musical projects, sharing testimonies of how Guy's songs have impacted our faith journeys. Third, we can become more thoughtful about what we believe and share, especially when it comes to information about people's private lives. Fourth, we can practice the kind of grace that assumes the best, that gives people room to be human. When all the dust settles from this particular rumor cycle, what will remain is the actual substance of Guy Penrod's life and ministry. His voice will still carry the weight of conviction and beauty that has defined his career. The hymns he's recorded will still provide comfort and inspiration to people facing their darkest moments. The example of faithfulness he and his family have demonstrated over decades will still speak louder than any temporary noise created by unfounded speculation. This is what his wife was pointing us toward when she encouraged a focus on positive impact and ongoing hope. As we close out this examination of what Guy Penrod's wife revealed and why it matters so profoundly, we need to recognize that this moment presents an opportunity for all of us to commit to higher standards in how we engage with information and how we treat public figures. The ease with which rumors spread doesn't excuse our participation in their spread. It actually increases our responsibility to be more careful, more thoughtful, more discerning. We can choose to be part of a community that builds up rather than tears down, that seeks truth rather than settles for sensationalism. The truth she revealed wasn't scandalous or dramatic in the way clickbait headlines promised. It was simpler and more challenging than that. The truth is that they're a family grounded in faith, navigating life's normal challenges with grace, committed to their ministry, and deserving of the same respect and privacy we'd want for ourselves. Now, if you found this deep dive into what Guy, Penrod's family actually revealed truly valuable and eye-opening, I need you to do something important right now. Hit that like button because it tells me that you want more content that cuts through the noise and gets to the real truth behind the headlines. But more importantly, subscribe to this channel and turn on that notification bell, because we're committed to bringing you honest, faith-centered content that respects the people we're talking about while also giving you the full context you deserve. Share this video with someone in your life who might have seen those rumors floating around social media, because the truth needs to spread just as fast as the speculation did. Drop a comment below and let me know, have you ever been affected by online rumors, either about someone you admire or even about yourself? How did you handle it? And what did you learn from that experience? Your stories and insights create a community here that's built on mutual respect and genuine faith. If you appreciate content that takes the time to go deep instead of just scratching the surface, check out our other videos where we explore the real stories behind gospel music legends and ministry families. Remember, every time you engage with this content, every like, every comment, every share, you're casting a vote for the kind of media culture you want to see in the world. You're saying that truth matters more than sensationalism, that grace matters more than gossip,